and we finished, or came real close. I think we were done for the most part
12.
with chapter 12 last week. And of course, chapter 12 of Revelation depicts that whole the signs of the woman, the dragon, and the child. You know, we're talking about the birth of Jesus. In Revelation 12, we had the woman, the child, and the dragon, which of course are pointing to Israel, to Satan, and to the Messiah. And we saw the picture that, John saw this battle in heaven, which was the archangel Michael and all of his army of angels against the dragon and his army of angels. And Satan lost that battle and was hurled to the earth. And we talked a lot last week? Yeah, last week. We talked a lot about that battle and the fact that Satan had lost all access at that point to God. Because up to that point, even though Satan was cast out of heaven, he still had some type of access to God. We know that from the story of Job, and we know that from all of us. Satan is the accuser of the brethren, of all of us. So in order for Satan to accuse all of us before God, he has to have access to God in some form or fashion. But he's going to lose that here at this battle that John told us about in Revelation 12. And that takes place at the midpoint of tribulation. That is what's really going to lead to the last half of tribulation, those last 3.5 years. That's what's going to play a part in making it so terrible. Because Satan is now going to be completely confined to this world, the earth, and he's going to be enraged. Why is Satan enraged? Even more so than usual in that last 3.5 years?
He knows his time is short.
He's lost everything, lost access to God. He has no more hope that he's going to be able to become God. And he...
I think he still has that hope?
I think, he must. I mean...
What would he be fighting for otherwise?
Right. So, but he knows, and you said it, it tells us there at the end of chapter 12, he knew, verse 17, then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring. Well, somewhere there it says, because he knew his time. Oh, at the end of verse 12, he's filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. So things are going to get really, really bad, and that is the last half of tribulation. Now, chapter 13 kind of picks up on right there where chapter 12 leaves off. Chapter 13, I'm just going to read here the first few verses, and starting in verse 1 of chapter 13. Mine says, and the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. Does anyone else have something different?
And I stood upon.
I stood upon. See, some of you will have, and I stood upon the shore of the sea, or the sand.
And saw a beast.
Okay. And then some of you may have, he stood. Mine says, and the dragon stood. How many have the dragon or he?
I got the dragon. Beast. Dragon.
Okay. So what this is John writing this. So some of them say I, which would mean John himself is standing there and watching this.
Right.
Others say the dragon, which we know is Satan. And when it says he, it's referring back to the last verse of chapter 12, which was talking about the dragon. So if you have he, that pronoun, it's referring to the dragon. Some of you have dragon, but some say I. This is just another example of manuscript inconsistencies. So it's not that, God's word is not in error. God's word is inerrant. But there were different copies, different manuscripts of the early text, and sometimes they differ. And I will tell you straight up, I'm no expert in, all these manuscripts, but my study tells me that the best translation, the most accurate manuscripts indicate that it is he or the dragon. as opposed to I. And probably if you have, you may even have a footnote. Anybody have a footnote that says there are manuscripts that say both? So just keep in mind that's either John himself standing on the sea watching this, or John seeing the dragon standing on the shore, which is, again, my study says that the dragon standing is the more accurate translation. Dale.
Yeah, mine says, then I saw a beast rising up out of the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether it's Satan on the shore or John, they're going to see the same thing. It is the beast coming up out of the sea that's going to be viewed.
Yeah, the New American Standard and the RSV has both.
Does it?
Yeah, it says, and he stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast. So
Okay.
it's both.
That's weird.
Even.
But so maybe they're both, John's watching and he sees the dragon. So either way, just keep in mind there is a difference there in the different versions, different translations will have either way. And that just goes back to manuscripts were copied a little bit differently. Sometimes that's because the copiers, there are some manuscripts that were copied by some of the Gnostics early on that had an agenda that could, that's problematic. I don't know that this makes a major difference. It's not a salvational issue here on this point. So, but just beware that there are minor differences. So, mine says, the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and then I also have, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. So I have both there also. Now this beast that's coming out of the sea, here's what it's going to say. He, which the he is referring to the beast. Okay? So regardless of whether it's the dragon or John standing on the shore, they're going to see a beast coming out of the sea, and the beast coming up out of the sea, he had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. So the dragon is who? Satan. So this beast that's coming up out of the sea is getting all of his power from whom? From Satan. That's clear in this. And the picture of Satan, going back to that verse 1, the picture of Satan standing on the shore is almost like Satan is summoning this beast up out of the sea. That's why I think that is a better translation of that, because it is Satan that is summoning this beast, because we read Satan gave the beast his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, how many heads does this beast have?
10.
No. 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. So you got to picture the crowns, each, I would imagine, a crown on each horn. And the word there, the Greek word for crown here is diadem. Does anyone know the other word for crown in the Greek? Stephanos. What's the difference?
Stephanos is an award
Yes.
received for something you've done.
Yes.
The diadem is royalty.
Right. Yes. The diadem is a ruling crown. It's a royal ruling crown. It's a ruler's crown. So these crowns on each of these 10 horns represent some kind of ruling authority. Stephanos, as Rick said, is a victor's crown. That's often, in the Greek language, it was given to someone who would be victorious in some type of a competition, generally, like a race or something like that. But these are ruling crowns on the 10 horns of this beast that also had the 7 heads. Now, verse 3, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound. Now, what would a fatal wound do to you?
Kill you.
By definition, it should kill you if it's a fatal wound. Otherwise, it's not a fatal wound. So one of those heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. How can you heal a fatal wound?
You can't.
Unless you what?
Unless you're
Special powers.
Well, which would be called a what?
A resurrection.
A resurrection, a miracle. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to heal a fatal wound is to, whoa, bring it back. Speaking of special power. Just kidding. Yeah, the only way to heal a fatal wound is to really resurrect something. Now, the whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Seemingly, the world was astonished by what?
A miracle.
Yeah, I mean the sight of this
Or the
beast or the
counterfeit
healing
miracle.
of that fatal wound, the miracle. So the whole world is going to be astonished and follow this beast. Men worshipped the dragon, which the dragon is who? Satan. So men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? Now let's read on here. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. Now what's 42 months? 3.5 years. So you get tired of hearing about 3.5 years. Remember, all of these mid-tribulation chapters that we're covering right now, all these events that happen at mid-trib are having a reference, have you noticed this, to the 42 months. 1,290 days, times and half a time, 42 months. It's all talking about the same period of time, which is one half of this tribulation. This is the most, for as confusing as this can be, and as many people that stumble over this, this is really the most well-documented period of time in the Bible. Is this day of the coming day of the Lord, this period of what we call tribulation. Great tribulation is the final 3.5 years. So we know that this beast is going to be given this authority for how long? 3.5 years. So it's coming up. He's coming up at the midpoint, and for the next 3.5 years to the end of the Great Tribulation, he's going to have this authority. Verse 6, he opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And who's giving him the power to do this? Satan. Okay. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth, and these are the earth dwellers that we've talked about, all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. All whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. So all the people that are not saved, including those that are going to come to faith during the tribulation, are going to worship this beast. That's what that's saying. And if their name is not written in the book of life, what's going to happen to them ultimately?
Thrown into the lake of fire.
They're going to be thrown into the lake of fire. All the people who choose to worship this beast and Satan are going to be thrown into the lake of fire. Verse 9, he who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. All right, that's the end of that part of chapter 13. Now, the next part of chapter 13 is going to talk about another beast. Where does the second beast that we're going to cover come from? Out of the earth. All right, so we'll talk about that, probably not today. But this first beast comes out of the sea. Now, how many of you have read this at some point when you're reading through Revelation and maybe had no real clear idea what the heck it was talking about? Yeah, me too. I mean, honestly, I have read this and read about these things, and it's just one of those reasons why I think people shy away from Revelation, because it is just, at first glance, kind of confusing. Does anyone have any idea, and I hate to be talking about the beast rising up right as Joe's walking through. Does anybody have any idea what this beast coming up out of the sea with 7 heads, 10 crowns, 10 horns, I mean, what is this? You only have 1 head.
That's what I was.
So what are we looking at? What is John talking about here?
This gives me a picture of the one with like the statue, and then all the little feet, all the toes.
From Daniel?
From Daniel.
Yeah.
It's like all the toes, and then that would split off from.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to, we talk about the book of Revelation in order to understand it. And the problem that people have, and the reason that we often read or have read in the past Revelation, and I'll tell you right now, this is complicated. It doesn't have to be as complicated as what you may think, but even for me to try to teach it, sort of like when we did this Daniel chapter 9, I felt like, ooh, that's tough to grasp in one sitting. And this is also going to be kind of difficult to grasp. So I'm going to try to do the best I can. We may not, however far we get today, we'll just stop and then we'll pick up with it next week. But the problem that people have with Revelation is that they try to read this and try to make it make sense without really following the rules of interpretation or understanding. And you remember when we started this study, we talked about the different rules for interpretation. To really understand Revelation, you have to know the rest of the Bible. And we took a break, if you recall, for over a month in the middle of this study and went back and did what? Daniel. We did a lot of Daniel. We didn't do all of Daniel, but we did sort of a bird's eye view of Daniel. And we got fairly in depth in several of the chapters. But the reason we did that is because there are so many things in Daniel that you have to understand the book of Revelation. Now, there are things in other parts of the Bible too, the Old Testament especially, that you have to understand to fully understand the book of Revelation. But this would make no sense to you at all. This beast with all these heads and the horns, and it would make no sense if you didn't really understand Daniel, because Daniel tells you a good deal about what this means. Now,
It's like when you're studying in school current events, or if you don't know the history, then you won't understand what's going on.
right, yeah. I mean, you have to understand, and
Right.
you've got to know, for a lot of things that are happening now, you have to understand things that have happened in the past. And so your Bible study is the same way. Now, first of all, the word here that's used in the Greek for beast is a word that's called therion. It's Therion, I believe. And Greek had a couple of different words that could mean beast. This word actually means like a brutal, savage, vicious beast. Like when we think of a beast, this word is what we think of. Now, we also, when we remember the living creatures back in chapter 4 and 5, the cherubim, there was a word there in the Greek that also could be translated beast. That was zoa or zoon, which is a word from which we get zoo, which can mean animal. And that's why we end up, most of our translations, when we talked about the cherub, it said living creature. Do you remember that? Because living creature is like a softer form of beast in the Greek. But the therion, which is the word we have here in chapter 13, is a vicious, teeth showing wild beast. And so these are creepy looking creatures. And I will also tell you there's a lot of disagreement among biblical scholars on the identity of these beasts. We're going to talk about the beast here that comes up out of the sea, and then the later part of chapter 13, the beast that comes from the earth. And I'm going to tell you that these are, to the best of my understanding and study, what's depicted here is actually this first beast that comes up out of the sea is the Antichrist. That is what is depicted here. And we're going to talk about that in detail today. The beast that comes up out of the earth is the false prophet. Okay? And that, you've probably heard this explained as maybe like an unholy trinity, satanic trinity. Has anyone ever heard that? That just like we have the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, Satan is trying to
Mimic it.
which is what he does. He counterfeits and tries to copy. And so he's creating, we already know these beasts we're told, they get their power and authority from Satan. So he's summoning these beasts to create an unholy or satanic trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. Now later on in chapter 16 of Revelation, we're going to read, it says, "Then I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs." And if you remember back, there was a plague of frogs in Exodus. You know, we talk about these things repeat themselves. Well, here in Revelation 16, you're going to see 3 evil spirits that look like frogs came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So there it's going to tell you about these 3, Satan, the beast, the first beast, which is the Antichrist, and then the false prophet. In chapter 19, we're going to see, or maybe it's chapter 19, verses 19 and 20. We're going to see that the beast is captured, and with him, the false prophet, they're going to be thrown into the lake of fire. And then later in chapter 20, we're going to see the dragon, Satan, thrown into the lake of fire. So there is this unholy trinity that that's going to be formed. But there are people that dispute whether or not these beasts, the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, there are people that dispute whether or not these are actual individuals or whether these are future empires or kingdoms that are coming. And part of the reason for that is because there is no word that was, the Greek did not have a word to distinguish a king from his kingdom. So, in a sense, the word that was used would represent both the kingdom and the king over that kingdom. So, you know, if you think about it, if there is, say these, and I think both can be correct. When we talk about the Antichrist, do we think that that's going to be an individual, a person? Does everyone think that the Antichrist is going to be a person?
It could be a person or a group.
It's going to be a person.
I think there is a person. But do we also think that he is going to have a kingdom behind him?
Good.
Yeah, he will. We're told he will. And we're going to talk about.
Horns represent 10 separate kingdoms.
Yeah, the 10 horns represent 10 kingdoms. And we know that. We've studied that before. And we actually, Revelation 17 is going to tell us that. And you may as well look ahead. Revelation 17, we'll look at this real quick. Verse 9. Revelation 17, verse 9. "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits." Because chapter 17 is about the woman riding the beast. And we'll do more of this when we get to chapter 17. But 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. You know what we refer to as the city on 7 hills?
Yeah, Cincinnati and Rome.
Well, there are more than one. There are more than one. But Rome was known as the city on 7 hills. But it also says in verse 10, "There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come." Now, when this was written, when John was writing this, which one was at the time? Which king was? Rome, the Roman Empire. So it says the seven, and I'm telling you, this is complicated, but the 7 kings, 5 have already fallen, 1 is, which was the Roman Empire, 1 is yet to come, which says there's going to be a future one yet to come. Those are the 7 heads. Look down at verse 12 in chapter 17. "The 10 horns you saw are what? 10 kings. Have they come yet? No, it says, "Who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast." Now, 1 hour is not very long, is it? So what's that mean? Does it mean they're really only going to reign for 1 hour? It's a short-lived, yeah, but there's going to be 10 future kings that are going to come, and they're going to receive authority as kings along with the beast. It says they have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. So those 10 horns do represent what? 10 future kingdoms that are going to come. So when John sees this beast coming up out of the sea with the 7 heads, those 7 heads represent 7 different kings. 5 have been, 1 is now, 1 is yet to come. And the 10 horns represent these 10 kings that we know are futuristic. But they're going to, when this happens, when John sees this at the midpoint of tribulation, these 10 kings are going to be known at that point. Now we know this also because we look backwards. Okay, now let's go back to Daniel chapter 7. And Geraldine, I think Geraldine mentioned the statue. That was Daniel chapter 2. And we've got here you remember this? You remember when we studied all this fun stuff? So in chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had the dream. You remember that?
Yes.
And Daniel interpreted it. And of course, there was the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, and then the legs of iron, and then the 10 toes that were iron mixed with clay. And what did all that represent? Kingdoms, right? What was the head of gold?
That was Nebuchadnezzar.
That was Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. And then you had the chest and arms of silver. Who did that represent? The Medes and the Medo-Persian Empire. And that's why you had the arms to show there were 2 nations that were going to come together and reign and rule that would overthrow the Babylonian Empire, and then the Medes and the Persians would rule. And then you had the belly and thighs of bronze, which was the Greek, Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire. And then the legs of iron, Rome, the Roman Empire. And then we were told that that's going to become from iron. It's going to become an iron clay mixture that's sort of going to fracture and reform. And that's sort of where we've gone when you think about the Roman Empire. And you got to understand, the Roman Empire, we think of Rome today, which is what? A city in Italy, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the Roman Empire? No, the Roman Empire was great. I mean, it covered down into Africa, over into Iraq and the Middle East. This was a huge empire. That was the Roman Empire. Rome now is just a city in Italy, but the Roman Empire was much more than that. In that chapter 2 of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, we were told that eventually this stone would come and it would destroy what? The entire statue and set up and rule and reign forever, and that stone is Christ. Okay? Well then, now look at Daniel chapter 7, because this happened later. This was Daniel's dream. And you're going to see some parallels here, but let's just read Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, and this would have been around probably 553 BC. By this time, Daniel had probably been in Babylon for, 40, 50 years. Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying on his bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, now look at this. This is going to blow your mind. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Now, you're going to flip back and forth between Revelation 13 and Daniel chapter 7. But, first of all, in Revelation 13, where did John see Satan summoning this beast from? The sea. Okay? So we've got Daniel's dream. 4 great beasts, or the winds of heaven churning up this great sea, and then 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. So what did Daniel see? Beasts coming up out of the sea. What is John seeing in Revelation 13? A beast coming up out of the sea. Now this is where it gets even cooler. Daniel's dream, back in chapter 7 of Daniel, verse 4. The first was like a lion with wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a man. and the heart of a man was given to it. So the first beast that Daniel saw resembled what? What did it say there? The first was like a lion. All right, and then verse 5. Then there was a second beast which looked like a bear. So you got a lion, then you got a bear. It says the bear was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. So the first 3 beasts Daniel saw, a lion, a bear, and a leopard, right? Now go back to Revelation 13.
With one head.
And what is the beast that John sees resemble? Start verse 2. A leopard, a bear, and a lion.
And
Now,
total 7 heads, same as Daniel's.
where do you 7 heads?
Yeah, because the first 3 animals,
Yeah.
I'd assume only 1 head, but the 4th animal had 4 heads.
Yeah. So there you go. 7. So there are these parallels. Now, they're in reverse order because when Daniel was looking, it was a lion, and then a bear, and then a leopard. And over here, John lists them as a leopard, bear, and a lion. Why would they be in reverse order?
That's what God showed them to him.
Well, that's how God showed them to him. But Daniel was looking
Into the future.
into the future. Here's what's going to come. John's looking how?
At what's happening.
These have already come. So here's something else even that makes this even cooler. Now in verse 7 of Daniel, so Daniel 7:7, because we've only talked about 3 of the beasts so far, but there was a 4th beast that Daniel saw, wasn't there?
Yes.
All right, and we analogize the beasts that Daniel saw to the statue in chapter 12. So the lion was what? What kingdom was the lion?
Wasn't it Nebuchadnezzar?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Babylon.
Yeah.
The bear was
Medo-Persian.
Medo-Persian Empire. And the bear even said it was like raised up on one side, stronger. The Persians were stronger than the Medes. The leopard, that was the Greek Empire. Why would the Greek Empire have been like a leopard? Oh, how quickly he conquered the entire kingdom.
Yeah.
Like a leopard. And then there was the 4th and final beast. So, the 4th beast, look at this. I looked and there, so this is Daniel 7:7. After that, my vision, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot what was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. So, this beast that John is seeing in chapter 13 of Revelation has characteristics of all 4 of these beasts that Daniel saw. Do you see that? I mean, you've got the lion, you've got the bear, you've got the leopard, and then with the 4th beast, the 10 horns, the beast that John sees in Revelation 13 had 10 horns. So that beast that John sees coming up out of the sea in Revelation 13 has characteristics of all of these beasts that Daniel saw in chapter 7. Now, we're going to hear something about the horns because Daniel in chapter 7:8, at verse 8, he really thought more about this 4th beast that he sees than any of the rest of them. Do you see that? Do you remember that when we studied it? This 4th beast was the one that really seemed to trouble him. And he says in verse 8, while I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, which means how many horns? That's the 11th horn. That's the little horn, okay? The little horn of Daniel. Came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Now, what's that sound like? When we go back over to chapter 13, and it talks about chapter 13 of Revelation, and we talk about speaking boastfully, look at 13 verse 5. I know I'm jumping back and forth. Revelation 13 verse 5. The beast that John saw was given a mouth to utter proud words. Would that be boasting?
Yeah.
All right. And blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. So that 11th horn that Daniel saw is the Antichrist. That is what John is seeing over here. That has characteristics of all the beasts that Daniel saw. Now, so he speaks boastfully, and back in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. Who is this?
Christ.
God, Christ, the Trinity. Yes, this is deity. His throne was flaming with fire. Its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the court was seated and the books were open. So right after Daniel sees this vision of this little horn speaking boastfully, he sees God, Christ. Okay? Now, Daniel continues, verse 11. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. What did we just say in chapter 20 of Revelation is going to happen to the beast? He's going to be thrown into the fire. And in verse 13 of Daniel chapter 7, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority and glory and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. So that tells you there that Christ is what's going to end the reign of the Antichrist. You see that? Now Daniel's troubled with this, and Daniel continues to struggle with the interpretation. Am I losing anybody, or are you guys good on this?
Good.
All right, this is important if you're going to understand Revelation, because these beasts are going to be fundamental to the rest of our study, and you have to understand this to know who these beasts are. So Daniel's seeking this interpretation of the dreams, and he's going to get it from an angel. Look at verse 17 of Daniel chapter 7. It says, this is the interpretation Daniel gets from the angel. The four great beasts are four kingdoms that will rise from the earth. So we don't have to guess that these beasts are kingdoms. Daniel was told that. We know these are kingdoms. But the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Then, this is Daniel, I wanted to know the true meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and the most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot what was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns. Wouldn't you want to know about the 10 horns if you saw a beast with 10 horns and all these heads? I mean, that's what Daniel wanted to know. He didn't understand it either. So when we try to read Revelation without that background information, we don't understand it. Neither did Daniel. So don't feel like, don't feel like you're ignorant if you don't understand it, because Daniel didn't either. But we have the benefit of reading about Daniel's interpretation. So he wanted to know about the 10 horns on the head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others and that had eyes and mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the saints and defeating them. So that little horn is going to rise up, and it says it was waging war with the saints and was defeating them until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. And then Daniel gets this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. That's what we just read in Revelation 17, that the 10 horns are 10 future kings. So there are 10 kings that are going to come. And 10 horns are 10 kings that will come from this kingdom. From what kingdom? When it says this kingdom, what kingdom is it referring to? Huh? It's referring to the fourth beast. What was the fourth beast? What kingdom? What kingdom was the fourth beast? The first beast was Babylon. The second beast was Medo-Persian. Third beast was Greece. The fourth beast is Rome. So it says that these 10 kings eventually are going to come from what was once the Roman Empire. Okay, that's why people say there's going to be a revived Roman Empire eventually. That's going to the Antichrist is going to come from that revived Roman Empire. So the 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 of them. So of the 10, this 11th, this little horn that's going to come up is going to subdue 3, which leaves how many? 7. 7. And he'll basically subjugate what's left. So they'll all be under him. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over to him for how long? Well, how about that? Right there in Daniel, it says that this guy, this 11th horn that's going to rise up and conquer these other 10 kings, is going to reign and rule and oppress the people for 3.5 years. Now, that should direct you to this 3.5 years right here, because that's what it's talking about. The same thing that we've talked about over and over again, the Great Tribulation. Now, look for a moment at Daniel chapter 9. That's when we did all this. Okay? We're not going to do all this again, but what we are going to do is we're going to talk about Daniel chapter 9, 20, look at 9:26. Okay? Because this is after Daniel 9:26. After the 62 sevens, and 62, the sevens were what? Do you remember what the sevens were? When we had 77s. The sevens were
Years of Jubilee.
periods of 7 years. Yeah. So 77s was 490 years. So 62 sevens was 62 times 7. It says the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come. So who's the ruler who will come?
Christ.
That's the Antichrist, is what that's talking about.
Yeah.
It says the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. When did that happen? 70 AD. Who destroyed the city and the sanctuary? The temple. Rome. So that tells you also the ruler who will come is going to come from the Roman people. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. Verse 27, he, who's he? Yeah, that's the ruler who will come. This is telling us about the Antichrist, the ruler who will come. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. Who are the many?
Everybody left.
It's the Jewish people. Yeah. And that covenant is going to be, remember we said the Antichrist is going to come in peace? And he's going to make a covenant with the Jewish people to rebuild the temple. But then in the middle of that 7, he's going to put an end to sacrifice and offering. And what's he going to do? And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. What's that mean?
He's going to proclaim himself God.
Yeah. So this ruler who will come, who is the Antichrist, is going to, for this 7-year period, make a covenant with the many, which are the Jews. The temple's going to be rebuilt. They're going to resume the sacrificial system, the offerings. But halfway through it, he's going to break the deal. And he's going to cut all that off. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up this abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed and poured out on him. So, I'll tell you what that means here in a moment. But remember Matthew 24? You remember Jesus? Remember Jesus talking about, so Daniel just told us about the abomination that causes desolation. Matthew 24, we're about done, people. Bear with me. Matthew 24 Jesus is going to refer to this, because this is when Jesus was giving a briefing on the end times to 4 of his closest followers. And in verse 15, Matthew 24:15, Jesus says, when you see standing in the holy place, what's the holy place?
The temple.
The temple. The abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. So this is Jesus pointing back to what Daniel called the abomination that causes desolation. Let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great what? Tribulation. Unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. So this is Jesus pointing back to what Daniel said, this abomination that causes desolation.
Don't think about it, just go.
Yeah, get out. And that's where we read at this midpoint. Remember last week we said Satan is going to really wage war on the Jews in Judea. And what are they going to do? Flee to the mountains. It's all the same. Whether you're in Daniel, you're talking about Jesus' words in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, or, last thing, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is Paul. Okay? This is Paul talking about this man of lawlessness. Who's the man of lawlessness that Paul talks about? He's the Antichrist. Also, these people in Thessalonica were afraid they'd missed the second coming of Christ. Paul's telling them they haven't missed it. In verse 3, Paul says, don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Does that sound like the same thing? Mm-hmm. Paul's saying the same thing. This man of lawlessness is going to come, set himself up in the temple, proclaiming to be God. And then if you read on there, I mean, it continues. It's clear that Paul is talking about the exact same thing that Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, same thing that Daniel talked about in Daniel chapter 9, 7, 2. And now in Revelation 13, John sees this all coming to fruition. Now that was a lot. Are you more confused now than you were when we started? Judy.
Man of lawlessness, is that the beast or the false prophet?
The man of lawlessness is the first beast. That's the Antichrist. The man of the and the Antichrist is actually we'll probably have to get into this next week. It's sort of an unfortunate title because you know how many times Antichrist is used in the Bible? Just a couple times. It's only used by John, but did John use Antichrist in the book of Revelation? Does it ever say in Revelation does it ever use the word Antichrist in Revelation? No, it doesn't. It calls him the beast. The only time the Antichrist is ever called the only time that's ever used is in John's epistles, 1 John and 2 John. Otherwise, he has all these different names. He's known as the little horn of Daniel, the man of lawlessness. He is, and somewhere I had a list of different names that we actually referred to him. The dragon is Satan. He's the idol shepherd back in, I think, Zechariah. There's a bunch of them, but he's not called the Antichrist very often. That's sort of just something that we refer to him in that way. But in Revelation, he's really the beast. Do you remember in Revelation 11? You remember the two witnesses that were how were they killed? In Revelation 11,
Were they struck down by the Antichrist or the beast?
they were killed by the beast. It says in 11:7, now when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. So the beast killed the two witnesses. This isn't all in chronological order. You know when the two witnesses are going to be killed?
At the end of the first 3.5 years.
In the at the midpoint. So the beast is going to kill the two witnesses. Now, the Antichrist is going to come. Is this the beginning of the Antichrist? This, when we see him come up out of the sea as this terrifying beast? No. He's already going to be known as a peaceful leader who's made this covenant. That's an important thing to keep in mind. The Antichrist is already known as a king, the 11th horn, that came up from among the 10 and initially makes a covenant with the Jews to rebuild the temple and resume the sacrificial system. He's going to be peaceful. When is he going to reveal himself as this ferocious beast?
After the mid-trib.
Right here, when he comes up out of the sea. This is the revealing at the midpoint of tribulation. That's when he's going to become, he's really going to reveal who he is. When he cuts off the sacrificial system. It talks about trying to change the set times and the laws. Do you remember reading that in Daniel? That's what's going to happen when the Antichrist is going to reveal himself for who he really is. To that point, he's going to be this charismatic leader that seems to be peaceful.
So is he suddenly just coming up out of the sea, or is he coming from the earth? I mean,
Well, in the sea, you know what the sea represents? All the nations in the world, all the people. The sea, back in those days, the sea referred to the Mediterranean. So when you talked about the sea, you're talking about like all the kingdoms. So this is somewhat symbolic, I believe, that this picture of this beast coming up out of the sea he's the embodiment of all these kingdoms that have trampled on the Jews for all these years, going all the way back.
He's been, but now all of a sudden.
Now he's going to come. Satan's going to empower him because Satan is what? Filled with rage because he's been cast out of heaven, lost his access, and he's going to put all his power into this Antichrist and this false prophet, and they're going to wreak havoc on the earth. We'll pick up there next week. I know that was a lot, but Cookie.
Intense.
What I picked up, it looks like the Antichrist is going to come out of Rome.
Well, that's a revived Roman Empire is, I think, whatever that looks like. But it sort of looks like, you know, the 2 feet of the statue that we were told would be, you know, the Roman Empire were the legs of iron, but then you get the feet with iron mixed with clay. The 10 toes are these 10 final kingdoms. And that's the age that we're going to be in when the stone comes and crumbles the whole statue. So I do believe it's going to be some type of a revived Roman Empire that is going to give the Antichrist.
Or
To the
we
world.
could be an extension of that Roman Empire.
Could be.
The way the countries are situated now.
Yeah, we could be part of that, you know, that iron clay mixture where it says basically different kingdoms are going to come to power and then crumble and rising and falling. All of that is still the era which we are in.
No,
You know what, this is one of those cases where it's good to be old. Because you'll probably be gone before that.
We may all be. We may all be. So, all right, let me pray and then we'll get on our way.
Yeah, it sounds like there's too much for even us that are in our 20s and 30s to live to see.
Probably so. All right, dear Heavenly Father, we lean on you because a lot of these things are they're intense, and left to our own device, there are many interpretations that man comes up with that are really just foolishness. And I just pray for wisdom and discernment from you, that we will take from your word what you want us to take, and nothing else, that we will not add to it, nor will we subtract from it. We will understand it as you want us to understand it. And that's our prayer for this study as we continue on through the book of Revelation. I just thank you for each and every member of our class here today. I pray for your comforting and healing hand to be upon all here that are hurting, that have lost loved ones, that are facing health issues and upcoming surgeries. We know that you are the great physician, the great healer, and I pray that be the blessing upon all of us. Pray for safety and for all of us as we go and over the next several days. Let us remember the true reason for the season, the greatest gift that's ever been given, the gift of your Son Jesus. That's what this is all about, is your plan to bring him to this earth to redeem mankind. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, God bless you.